page 8 through 13. It's great.
Okay.
It's really, really well, as far as getting a feeling for what it's going to be like to walk down Franklin, and
Right.
really enjoyed that.
Okay. And do we have access to the bits and pieces or just the PDFs that we have currently? So I could pick and choose?
Yeah, I could send you the actual PowerPoint if you want.
Then I can maybe just pull out of that what I need. That
Yeah.
would be great. I appreciate that, Leslie.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
And
I
then,
can pull some stuff out for you.
and then the last point, and I don't know if this is you, Leslie, or Manuel or something, is there anything specific you want on behalf of the city for me to convey to the new president of the university? Think about it. Yeah, you don't need
Yeah,
to
that
talk
we're
about
happy
it
to
now.
have you guys as partners.
Okay.
Okay, I think, see, Tisha got in, Manuel got in, Adam, yay, got in. Boy,
We're
I
gonna
don't know
get it
why.
by meeting 45, Leslie. I swear.
Adam,
it's the same link, and if you follow the one,
So I followed it and it told me I need to log in, but I'm like, I don't know where I need to log in. So I put in my email that you send it to, because I figure that would be the email that it would register as being a panelist.
right?
But for some reason it didn't, and then it let me join. So it just kicks me out. It says you need to log in as a panelist. I'm like, okay, I don't know where the login is. And then I did the web browser, but it takes me in as just a normal.
So you have to log totally out of Zoom and go back into your Zoom account.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not the yeah,
Maybe
the
because they
link,
used
it's
it for other things.
because I had
you
the
have
same.
to get out of it, like you have to close out of the program, or?
Yes, and then log back into your Zoom program. That's what I've had to do the last two meetings.
See, I haven't closed it all the way down. Got
Right,
it.
so
Good pro
restart
tip.
Zoom. Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
I don't use Zoom for anything but this, so, but then my computer stays on for months on end. You
Okay,
turn it
so
off, I might lose something. You never know.
Yeah.
we are
And I pulled up the
recording,
agenda.
and I think
Hold on, I thought I pulled it up.
we have everyone here,
I got it.
except for those who've said they won't be here.
All right. So I would like to call to order the meeting of the Downtown Community Task Force for November 17, 2022. Leslie, please call roll.
At 6:06 p.m. Okay. Member Thompson,
Here.
Member Ondrasek,
here.
Member Mayer,
Here.
Member Von Hume,
Here.
Member Vargas Smith,
Here.
Member Reed. He is not here. He did send an email saying that he would be joining the meeting probably about 30 minutes late. We'll need to use him from the beginning. Member Coyne,
Here.
Member Ty. She also sent an email saying she would not be able to attend this meeting. And then Member Varjane.
Yep.
All right. Is there a motion to excuse or not excuse Member Ty from this meeting, and to excuse or not excuse Member Reed for the first 30 or so minutes of this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in
Dan
favor?
Butch.
Aye.
All in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. All right, they are excused. Thank you. And then Leslie, will you please read the DCTF meeting procedures into the record?
Yes, thank you. Meetings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the DCTF directs all activity during the meeting. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent meeting. Special procedures, time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the chair. Copies of the current agenda and staff reports for each of the items on the agenda are available on the Downtown Precise Plan website, as well as on the city clerk's website.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. We'll now move on to the consent calendar.
The procedure for the consent calendar is as follows. Consent calendar items may be enacted or approved by one motion unless requested to be removed by anyone for discussion or explanation. We have two items on the consent calendar this evening. We have item 1A, the Downtown Community Task Force meeting minutes of October 20th, 2022, and item 2A, the Downtown Community Task Force meeting minutes of the October 21st, 2021 meeting.
Awesome, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So
I make
moved.
the motion.
Seconded.
Here, Tisha. And then
All right, all in favor of approving the consent calendar, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All right, motion passes. Consent calendar is approved. Moving to general business. Leslie, will you please announce the first item?
So our first item we have for you today is a report back on the Surplus Land Act informational meeting that we had with the attorney, and we have Manuel here to give you that update.
Yes, good evening, chairs, members of the task force. Pleasure to see you again today. No slides for me, just a brief update based on the last discussion that we had with the task force on the Surplus Land Act. And I think a specific discussion about RFPs or RFQs for the property and the timing for that. So I did have a communication with the attorney. We had a meeting with our outside attorney as well on the Surplus Land Act, the process and the timing, and just wanted to update you on that. So I think specifically what we were hearing last time is, can we start the RFQ or RFP process for the property sooner rather than later? So based on the conversations we have with the attorney, there's two things I want to touch on today. One is the Surplus Land Act process itself. And as we kind of discuss this further, and I know there's been questions on this before also, is there a way that the city doesn't have to go to the Surplus Land Act process? And I do acknowledge there are exceptions based on the discussions we had. It's highly unlikely that or beneficial that we would be able to apply any of those exceptions, although there is one exception that could be a possibility, but the benefits don't seem significant enough to go to that process, and we can get into the details of that at some point as we explore it further. So where we're at right now is, as we had stated before, is we think that the city will need to go through a Surplus Land Act process as part of the city property. Like I said, well, I'll continue to explore that one exception. I've been talking to Leslie and Rena about it, but the benefits might just not be there for us. So the second question was, at what point should we do an RFP, RFQ, or start the Surplus Land Act process? And I think Deborah had this question about advancing some of that work with council. And as part of that discussion, I think what the attorney said to us was that we should not proceed. And as an attorney said, advise, right? We can always do what we want. Advise not to proceed on any actions related to the Surplus Land Act or any RFP, RFQ that would be affected by the Surplus Land Act until the precise plan has been considered and assume adopted by council. So basically the feedback is that when we do the Surplus Land Act process, we can require whoever is interested in the property to follow the requirements of the precise plan, but we cannot do that unless the precise plan is formally adopted. So the Surplus Land Act process and the start of that would have to wait until after consideration by the city council. If we started before, then we could not require anyone who submits as part of that process to meet the requirements of the plan, since it's not an adopted document. From a time frame perspective, because I know time is very important, and I know that there's different goals in mind, but we've been very clear that we have to kind of work through the process and what we're required to do. As a reminder, the Surplus Land Act process is two initial steps, right? The city has to declare that the city is surplus, and then you put in a 60-day notice of availability or notice of interest, where any of the people who qualify to submit, which is typically public agencies like school districts, so on and so on, but also affordable housing providers can submit to say they're interested. So you have 60 days for them to submit their interest. And then if there's interest, there's a minimum, and I like to say minimum because it's a minimum, 90-day negotiation process with those parties that are interested to see if there's a deal that makes sense or something the city would be willing to accept. So my two key takeaways or three key takeaways for the task force today, and certainly because this will affect the scheduling when things happen. One is that there are exceptions. We'll continue to look at one specific one related to affordable housing, but based on what we've seen so far, the benefits are limited. Two, that we would have to go to the Surplus Land Act process and the timing that requires to do it and go review any interest associated with that. And three, that the attorney, I would say strongly advised not to take any of those actions until formal adoption of the plan, because otherwise we can't require anyone who submits to meet the requirements of the plan. That can only happen after the plan has been formally adopted. So that's my full presentation for you today. And of course, I'm available for any questions or clarifications you might have.
Thank you, Manuel. Appreciate it. Letitia?
So Manuel, will we also need council's approval to do the Surplus Land Act process?
Yes.
Or
Yes, the council is the one who has the authority to declare the property surplus, and that is at a council meeting. So we would have that would need to occur at a council meeting.
okay, so is that something we could tag along in terms of timing with the same meeting where we have the final precise plan adopted, or we have to wait and once the plan is adopted and then we bring this back to council?
Yeah, I would not propose to do it at the same meeting. I think that would be a little awkward to do it at the same meeting. I can certainly work to do it at the next meeting, right? Have everything lined
Okay.
up and the council reports, but that probably would be the better approach.
Okay, thank you. But there's no regulatory requirements to wait 90 days, 60 days. Got it. I just needed the regulatory.
Now, once the precise plan's adopted, it's my understanding we can proceed.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deborah?
Yes, we were looking at a timeline when this question came up as to whether or not we could do things in parallel or they had to be sequential. So does this change that timeline that we were looking at last time?
And Leslie, I don't know if we had a timeline for the RFP and that. I think
We
only had a
didn't.
timeline
It was
for
always-
plan adoption.
Yeah, it was always after plan adoption.
Yeah.
Okay,
But I think the
Okay,
question
thanks.
came up from you guys is whether we could do things parallel, but our
yes.
schedule had always been after plan adoption.
Okay, thanks.
And just to clarify that, when you go to the Surplus Land Act, and I've gone through it before and I'm going through it now for a separate property, part of the negotiation process is that the city has to have fair negotiations with anyone who submits. So certainly, we don't want to be drafting an RFP and RFQ to go out, assuming that your negotiations are not going to be successful, because that would not be a fair and equitable approach. So we'll have to look at that as we get closer and see what level of interest there's in the property. I think as we get closer, we'll probably have to start laying out a schedule as to what might work. But I just did want to note the minimum, right? 60 days for people to respond with interest. And then if anyone responds with interest, there's a minimum 90 days of negotiation. And I note minimum because I've been in processes before where the negotiations are happening and you will go longer than 90 days if you're close to getting to a deal.
Letitia, did you have something else?
So if the negotiation fails, then we can use the land whichever way, or will it still be only for affordable housing if the negotiation fails?
Well, and then I do want to note, right, that it doesn't necessarily have to be an affordable housing provider. It could also be another, like somebody else who submits that fits within that criteria, but because of this precise plan, that's the most realistic one. If the negotiation fails, depending on what the negotiation is, then at that point, and you would have the opportunity, what I would propose is to do a RFP, RFQ of interest to see what private developers might be interested in the property. But, you do have to take it one step at a time. And we'll see if there is interest as well from affordable housing providers or anyone else once we put it out under the Surplus Land Act.
And this is just more of a clarifying question on Surplus Land Act. Do we just have to go with the state defined list of affordable housing developers, or anyone outside of that list can respond to our initial RFQ?
There's a specific list that you send it to. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very long, I'll note that is a very long list because I just
Okay.
for another property. So yeah, there's a lot of names in there that you've never heard of before.
Got it. Thanks, Manuel.
I emailed them all, so I think it's like 300 and something. So, hey, Manuel, it has to go out to public agencies first though, right? And the local public agencies for an offering.
It goes to
Declared
it goes to
surplus?
everybody at the same time.
Oh, everybody at the same time. Okay. I thought I read it that it goes to like the local municipalities first for first grabs. And then if it's not picked up for like parks or schools or something like that, then it goes out to the affordable housing. And then if that doesn't happen, then it goes out to the open market.
I'll double check,
No?
but
Okay.
what I have done in the past is the 60 days applies to everybody going out at the same time.
okay.
But if I'm
Yeah.
incorrect, I'll double check
No,
with my attorney and I'll send an email out
Yeah,
to the
sorry.
No,
I
no,
just,
no, no.
that's the way I thought I read it that way, like municipalities, government agencies get first grabs, then affordable housing, then open market. But yeah, thank you.
I'm
Sorry.
not, I followed it before, and then, if somebody always brings up a point where I might have it different than me, I'm always happy to look into it to see if there's anything that I need to clarify. So I'll look into it, and if there's no correction needed, I won't send anything out. If there's a correction needed, I'll send something out with that correction to the full task force.
Well, thank you very much. Does anyone have any additional questions before we go to public comment? Letitia, your hand's still up? I'm assuming you're good. Perfect. All right, we'll go to public comment. So anyone in the public, there is no chat, so you'll have to raise your hand and then we'll call on you and we'll allow you to unmute yourself. So please now, if you would like to speak on this item number 1, which is the surplus land act, please raise your hand.
I see no one.
I don't see anyone. All right, we're going to close public comment and we're going to move on to the next item number 2.
So for item number 2, we have your review of the final draft of the form-based zoning code for downtown. And we have our consultants here this evening with us to kick off that presentation. And I think, Peter, were you going to start? And
I can start, Leslie, but
okay.
but my topic is not the form-based code. So is this
Right.
Yeah.
True, yes. So yeah, let's do that. Hold on. I forgot. Let's go ahead and start with the form-based code, and then we'll do the next bit under the next item. So sorry, David or Andrew, you're both here. I don't know which one of you is going to kick us off with the presentation.
Okay, I have the presentation up. You probably do too, Andrew.
Yep, but you could share for timing's sake.
Yeah, I'll just start and I'll go quick. We're gonna go at a very high level, just a quick reminder of how the code generally works, and then we're going to focus just on the things that we have refined in the last couple of months, mostly in response to your good comments and questions. So let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I'll go to presentation view. So I'm going to go briskly through this because you've seen this before, but just in case anybody's watching who didn't before. So we're just focusing here on the code. The plan, of course, that Peter and his team at WRT has made defined the restored street grid of the historic downtown and the designs for the streetscapes and the other public spaces and the whole, ambiance of the place and the connection to the rest of town. So what I'm showing here is just the technical document that requires that each new building contribute to the overall vision and pattern of the downtown. So we're looking at a typical block, and the code, well, the precise plan has redefined the street rights of way and hence the private blocks that are bounded by frontage lines. And then in order to implement the intentions of the plan for the most active retail, restaurant, entertainment environment to be focused along certain streets and at certain intersections, we have the shop front overlay that informs a lot of the design characteristics of the building, a retail ready overlay that essentially makes the ground floor available for future retail, even if it isn't to start with. And then the general overlay, which allows residential on the ground floor, but requires that the ceilings be high enough that if in the future businesses wanted to move in, they wouldn't be squished down. And then this very special neighborhood overlay on the edge streets, particularly Benton and Homestead and the south one, the west. Madison, thank you so much. I always cross up my M presidents. I knew it wasn't Monroe. Okay. Requires that the frontage be very compatible with housing across the street. So they have to have setbacks. Now there's a separate plan in the code that tells you where you have to have setbacks. And then in certain places an arcade is required. We'll talk about those standards in a minute. And within these frontages where long-term there's a hope for commercial activity, breaks are allowed in the form of courts or such, but along the neighborhood overlays, some breaks are required. And I'll show you that in 3 dimensions in a minute. So then when you get up into 3D, obviously where you may have retail now or in the future, you have to have big windows. Where you may have residential or non-residential, you have to have nice windows facing the street, but they don't have to be shop type windows. Very importantly, because this is a traditional we're recreating a traditional downtown, and it's very close to historic neighborhoods. It's very important that the buildings not be huge, bulky things, but they be articulated into facades that have width parameters that are compatible with the historic fabric that we're replacing after all these years. And along the neighborhood overlay, it's required that the height transition down from a maximum of 9 that you can attain with density bonuses in the retail core down to 2 and 3 stories where you're across the street from houses. This arcade is required to make this a more active place and also to control the scale of the space. And then flipping around and looking at it from the retail side, here's where you have to have some breaks here. And that's so that the buildings have more of the appearance of buildings that are similar in size and scale to houses rather than big downtown buildings. It's very unusual, and I think it's unusual. It's an unusual opportunity. And I think with everybody's help and collaboration, we have hit a pretty good balance and strategy for transitioning in just one block from potentially pretty serious downtown environment on Franklin to a very neighborhood compatible fabric on Benton. It's unusual to do it in this short distance, but we think we've got the tools here to make that happen. And not only must the height be limited, but the articulation must be into pieces that have the scale and size of the pieces of the houses across the street. For the transition as honoring Main Street as an important entry to downtown, things get a little more downtownish. That's the technical term, is more downtownish. And then it steps up systematically toward Franklin. And the buildings are articulated horizontally. So we've refined some of the criteria for that articulation. That's what we're really going to focus on. That was just background, just to remind everybody. So why are the things we're going to show you in a second important? So that kind of technique was used brilliantly by our colleagues in Pasadena to create new buildings across the street from these historic houses that are pretty. There's a lot of apartments over here, but it doesn't look like a big apartment project. It looks like it belongs across the street from houses. And the neighbors there accepted it very quite happily. So these are some refined pages that we have made. So to achieve the intent of downtown that is compatible with the memory and the history of what downtown Santa Clara was, and with the neighborhoods around it. It's important that the buildings be broken down into smaller pieces, and you just do that with good design. And so simple combinations of variations in the height of the building, in some cases the height of the ground floor, in all cases groupings of windows that give buildings both a measure horizontally and also give generally a vertical proportion. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. We've added some stuff into the design guidelines that we think are terribly important in terms of not literally style, but certainly scale and we'll get there in a minute. So basically that just needs to not look like one big box. It needs to look like pieces. Another way to organize it into pieces is to have courts that either come nearly to the ground or all the way to the ground, so that a single building, this is clearly one building, but it's also clearly several massing elements that aren't just a big box. So we've got criteria in the code for how deep and how wide the gaps have to be, because sometimes if you just say there has to be a break, the developer, the architect will just put a little dent in a big box and tell you that it's a break. It's like, well, no, it's got to be more than a foot deep and it's got to be more than 2 feet wide. It has to be, like a space that you could be in.
And these breaks are just for the neighborhood overlay so that it reacts to the house forms across the street.
These are certainly not required on Franklin Street. Now, they're not unwelcome on Franklin Street if this is a courtyard full of restaurants and activity. That could be a suitable thing on Franklin, but little yard spaces between the buildings, not so much. And they're optional. They're optional in the core, but they're required on this edge to give you the appearance of separate buildings like the houses across the street. And then there's the question of when should massing increments look like separate buildings and when should they just look like you've got one big building that's articulated into multiple ones. And this is a complicated subject because, and it has a great deal to do simply with the skill of the architect. And that's a hard thing to legislate. Because sometimes in the hands of some architects, you get, what is often called the Disneyland effect, where they're just sort of throwing different colors of paint and a few different kinds of windows on the front of a big box and calling it urbanism. On the other hand, in skilled hands, in this case, this is a building in Washington, D.C. designed by some friends of ours. This is a building recently built in Hercules where I made a master plan for this new downtown 22 years ago, and they're finally building it. And it can be very skillfully done where these legitimately distinct architecture can be a very pleasant thing rather than just, stuff glued to the front of a box. And it has to do with combinations of height and roof profile variation, architecture changing as you move across the block. And so what we've said is that in this case, we think that the 300-foot blocks that make up the new downtown should not, you should have at least 2, usually 3 apparent buildings. Even if somebody comes in and offers to build a whole block as one project, it shouldn't look like one building. It should look like at least 2 or 3. And within those, they need to be organized into bays that give you a vertical or a horizontal organization of vertically composed elements. So that it's tallness more than boxiness. And that a lot of that is based on the historic structure of Santa Clara. Now, this was a very now what we're doing here is a 21st century reinterpretation of a very early 20th, late 19th, early 20th century town, where the scale is different. The buildings are going to be taller than this because this isn't 1916. And they're going to be wider because, I mean, in this case, you had individual people buying 25-foot lots and building a building. That isn't what the economy of the 21st century is going to bring you. So it'll be different in those respects, but I think we've captured the essence of this in terms of the pedestrian experience, the height and the rhythm of the ground floor with awnings and galleries and shop fronts, and then organization of pieces in a new 21st century way that'll give you some of the same rhythm that keeps pedestrians interested in walking, which is what a downtown has to do. And these new buildings in Hercules do a pretty good job of doing that. They were designed by a San Francisco architecture firm, a couple of years ago, across the creek from these houses that we got built 20 years ago. So, and then when it comes to the composition of each facade, we're introducing the notion of visual structure. And that's something that a lot of architects don't quite get, because modern materials include, steel frame, curtain wall, foam, heaven help us, Dryvit and stucco. So you can make sort of any old shape that pops into your head show up on the front of a building without breaking a sweat. But the essence of downtowns in general, and this isn't just any old downtown, this is your historic downtown Santa Clara. So in the teens of the last century, buildings were made out of heavy materials like brick and stone. And those materials and the historic styles from which that were generated by those materials have a logic to them, which is that if you make the window really wide, it's going to fall down because the building up above it's heavy. And the way you make windows out of heavy materials is you make them narrower and taller and put lintels and arches at the tops of them. So even if you're building your new building out of steel and stucco, you got to kind of stick with those proportions and that logic in order to make it look like it belongs in Santa Clara. So we've put a bunch of guidelines, and we've described it in terms of that the proportions need to be such that if it was made out of the materials that you're pretending that the building's made out of with your phone, then the proportions have to be structurally sound. And that informs the making of bays, that informs the way that columns support the walls above them, that informs the ways that windows are spaced with, thick enough pieces of wall in between them that it wouldn't break if it was made out of brick, etc. And the same goes to projections, that balconies need to really structurally support themselves, and if they're made out of something magical, they need to look like they can support them. Not magical, but if they're made out of a modern material that doesn't follow this logic, it needs to look like it. So for instance, if this was supposed to look like a wooden balcony, the beams that support it would need to be big enough that they would work if they were wood, even if they're actually just made out of foam. Then we very much took to heart your comment about galleries. We hadn't emphasized that enough, because galleries, the covered walkways that were so characteristic of the historic downtown Santa Clara, and we hadn't paid them enough attention. And so we've now enhanced the guidelines about them, and we've developed a plan that requires projections. We will also enhance the guidelines for projecting balconies, projecting bay windows, projecting canopies and signs, and then certainly galleries and arcades. So the arcades the galleries are covered sidewalks with just a roof. Arcades are where there's rooms above the covered walkway, where the building above the ground floor actually projects into the public right of way. So here's historic examples of galleries. This is a arcade, excuse me. This is a modern arcade in London where the building is over the sidewalk and pedestrians are walking under the building. Here's an arcade in San Francisco. Here's some beautiful arcades in Seaside, Florida, where Andrew's done a bunch of work. And then, you know, here's some galleries in Nevada City, which is a fantastic, Nevada City and Old Town Sacramento and Old Downtown Santa Clara offer fantastic examples of, and the cool thing about arcades and galleries is that they really interlock the public space and the private building. They're basically, the building just comes out and grabs you as in a positive, in a gentle way. The building comes right out and starts to envelop you as you're on the sidewalk. So you're sort of halfway into the building where you're still outside. So it provides this really fascinating overlap between public and private, as well as, you know, keeping the rain off and some sun in the summer. So we've provided enhanced guidelines for arcades and for galleries and arcades, and these are diagrams, but we've included more and we have standards for how make it clear that what's inside there is shop fronts with big openings, and that they're covered, that they're enclosed but not hidden by the arcades and galleries. They must not hide the shop fronts. They must just enclose the pedestrian space. And then here's some examples. So as I may have mentioned, my wife and I moved up here to Folsom last spring to be close to our family. And it turns out Old Town Folsom has one of the best collections of galleries around. So I just took a bunch of pictures. And we put them in here, and we've got some specific guidelines about how big the piers should be so that they're heavy enough to support visually and structurally the building above, but they're not so fat that they're blocking the views of the shop fronts. And then finally, again, in response to your comments before, we included what I think is a beautiful set of spreads about ways of incorporating art. We had the principle that every 50 feet, as you walk down the street, there should be some public art providing a gift to the street, and it can be in the form of just pure art. It could be sculpture or mural painting or another form of fine art. It can also be in the form of signage elements that rise to the level of art. It can be useful objects like bike racks that are certainly elevated above simply, you know, holding up a bike. So it can be street furnishings. It can be signage, and it can be sidewalk plaques. It could be murals. It could be grand ornate entrances. Andrew, what building is this? Is this the Eastern building?
It's downtown LA. I think it's the Eastern building. It's one of the two.
It's the Eastern building.
There you go.
Thank you.
If that ain't art, you know, we don't know what art is.
It looks like the Paramount. I think that was the same guy.
And then this is Rockefeller Center, I believe. I was cheating when I grabbed this picture. But I mean, there's this long tradition of enhancing special points within a building or within a block with art. So it could be painting, it could be pure sculpture, it could be signage, it could be landscape, and it could be architectural ornament.
So while the precise plan, discusses art in the public realm and the public network, this is how developers on the private side, public facing, but in their role as private developers, can also be contributing. So this is in addition to what's happening in the precise plan with the public realm.
And you can't code this. You can illustrate it and encourage it and just stick to your guns. So that we wanted to make that relatively brief. I hope that was not too brief and not too long, but we wanted to let you know the pieces that we beefed up. And it was mostly in response to your good observations about what we had emphasized on. Questions? Or Peter, you want to just keep going?
Yeah, let's see here. Can
I had a question.
Please.
Hi.
Hi.
I love your the section of sidewalk that can become a commemorative plaque. I think that's really done well. It's different. I've not seen that. I've seen it. I'm Portuguese. In Portugal, we do a lot of pavers where art is incorporated, important dates, that kind of thing.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that. I was wondering if somehow a mention could be involved, because I was chatting with the consulate of Portugal, who loves Santa Clara Valley because there's a lot of history here. And he said 70% of the population at its peak was Portuguese in the valley. So it seems like we need a little something thrown in there to represent.
Turns out the Portuguese were pretty good farmers. And
we are.
I'm not suggesting that's all there, but I know that there's such a long, deep tradition of Portuguese immigrants just farming.
Yes. They contributed that way.
Of course, in all the valleys, in the San Joaquin, Santa Clara, down Monterey County. Yeah.
Also very coastal people. We're very good at fishing and whaling and all of that as well. They're two strengths, land and sea.
Well, they took salt cod all over the planet.
Just my little comment I was throwing in there.
Thank you. No, we can certainly add that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be brass, and it can be beautiful pavement. Yes, and in any, I think let's add just a little mention that simple things, well, tile work and masonry in general, whether ground surfaces or walls or objects, offer a lot of rich possibilities for elevating them through good design.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add a little something to that
Yeah,
as well, David and Deborah?
Yeah.
So both the code and the plan speak to public art and speak to it both in the context of the public realm, which is, I think, this example, or as well as on private development of buildings. And so the plan is saying that all new development should incorporate public art in one way or another, and the plan also calls for promoting public art and wayfinding in the public realm, and as an implementation program to initiate a plan for public art and wayfinding that involves, the Arts Commission and others who would be interested in being part of that.
Yeah,
so ideally, we don't just look at it in a one-off and say, oh, let's do this Portuguese thing, because that's great. It's a great idea. I talked to this person, but it's actually, it's part of a whole thoughtful process of, that and then all of these other historical influences and other things that we might want to reflect.
So that'll be further developed as an implementation program.
Yes.
After the adoption of this plan.
Yes.
I wanted to add something about public art, if I could. That sometimes, look, how you define what truly is art, because I worked with a art curator before, and he's a friend of mine, and he's pretty vocal about, sometimes you see huge office buildings and they have this stainless steel circle in front of it. And you could say that that's sort of, it is art, but he's more intense about what qualifies as true art versus something that's just maybe not as much so. And there might be some words that can be included within the precise plan that kind of capture the essence of art, a little more narrow, pinpointing it, I guess, so that you can't, some developers like to just throw these things in, and I'm not saying they're not one-offs, but it has to have a little bit more effort. It's behind it, I think.
And
I don't know if I'm,
no, that makes perfect sense, Rob. And I think it's complicated, of course.
Yes.
That it, having it rise to the level of actual art is very important. Having it also integrated with the place and the space and it is also important because I mean, somebody can just come in and do a checkerboard floor, okay. Or somebody can come in and just, put a little figurine up on a little pedestal in the corner. Well, is that art? Yes, it is art. No, so why is it here? Don't know. As opposed to what the lady was mentioning a minute ago, that if you have some truly brilliant mosaic floor or hello, like the old terrazzo entries to a lot of the theaters in the 19 teens and 20s. They were commercial and they were branding the facility, but they were just anyway. So it's a delicate, because there's a lot of art that just doesn't make sense in a public place. And then there's a lot of nice materials that aren't art.
Right. So it's just capturing that in words, the essence of what we're striving for.
Do you
with
think
art.
do you think that should be in the plan, or do you think that's something that the Arts Commission maybe
Well,
should be
this
interested?
is Deborah. I'm representing the Cultural Commission, and we don't really have an arts master plan per se, but I like the idea of having a bit of influence or evaluation role in what does get constituted as art, because I understand what Rob is saying, and for years I've called it just the steel pasta, like something that looks like penne or something, and people call that art. And I think it should be, aesthetically pleasing, reflective of the place, maybe reflective of the history, or whimsical, or something that is, as Rob said, has a little more thought, and as Anna said, has a sense of history as well. So I think that the people who live in Santa Clara are the ones who might be best to judge what would be an actual gift to the street, rather than the developer.
Yeah.
That's going to have to be something that's evaluated on a case-by-case basis, based on principles that we can, I think, articulate. Well, I think we already have. We could probably wordsmith it a bit, but ultimately, there's going to have to be a public, some sort of a public-private or civic entity.
Yeah, I agree, and I am working on that. It's another kind of long-term plan, but we need to have an arts master plan in the city of Santa Clara, and we don't have one right now. And it's not just for downtown, but for all the new developments that are happening. There needs to be, some role of the Cultural Commission in what's being placed in the city. So I will take action on that. But in the meantime, I do like the idea of having some kind of curation or partnership between the developer and the city before art is installed.
Yes.
I could probably get a statement. I know, Deborah, you know who I'm talking about when I talk about curators. Lance Spung curated the snow show. I believe it's called the Snow Show in Torino Olympics, or the ice show. I always get that mixed up. But he worked with the arts in the ordinance or whatever in Redwood City I think it was, or Palo Alto, I forget, but he has a statement in there about what constitute art. And I'll find that statement and I'll just forward it on to you guys, David and Peter, and just do what you think best or nothing. But it's well thought out, is from what I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Having said all that, I really love the fact that the acknowledgement of a role and a place for art is included in this document. So thank you.
Thank you.
Atisha, you've had your hand up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you could go back to the gallery slide.
Sure. Which one? This one?
Either one is fine. I think this one is fine.
I'm
So
sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, the one with the blue. I love the idea of galleries. I mean, I grew up in a traditional town in India, and the whole beauty was about the galleries. I
Yes.
just want to be a little bit more careful about how we define the minimum and maximum of the width of the columns, because I think we should also define the maximums in this case,
Yes.
that how wide these columns can be.
Yes, for sure. Yes, Andrew, please, let's talk about that. Yeah, because if these were 30 inches square, that would be kind of horrid.
Yeah,
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 and
they take away a lot of public space, and
Yeah.
I mean,
So
if
right
you,
now,
yeah, if you drive around with Peters, all the new construction around Bart, like they have given all these balconies, but then the balconies have like these thick pillars, so it just makes me think, why to even give balconies or any of these openings when you have to cover. I have lived in a townhome where our entire patio was taken away by this thick column, which no one would ever see. So just being a little conscious of on both sides, like I love the idea.
And
Yeah.
particularly in a place like Santa Clara that has a tradition and a history of galleries. So, I mean, is it possible to have a gallery with a thicker column? Yeah, but here, no. So I think we get just to decide, because I think in this context, gallery, the posts of galleries are going to be made of or imagined to have been made of wood, iron, or steel. In all cases, they're not thick. And then arcades, on the other hand, are almost certainly made of or are supposed to look like they're made of masonry.
Mm-hmm.
And they're holding up a building, not a balcony.
Yep.
So I think we should have some minimums and maximums for both. And for the galleries, they should be thinner.
Yeah,
sure.
so that's actually, that's one bit of language we thought about more in this round. So with the gallery, what we decided on to give them a little bit of wiggle room, we went with 1 foot wide, because we didn't think that anything steel or wood would really need to look like bigger than 1 foot if it's not, because it's not holding up building above it, it's just holding up roof. And then they have for arcade, what we're currently saying is 3 feet or 1/5 of the distance between supports, whichever is less, so that you don't have so that you don't do 3 feet and then a 5 foot opening and then 3 feet and then all of a sudden you're blocking the shop fronts again. If you actually maxed out at that 3 feet, you need to have a 15 foot opening so that you're getting that right proportion of open to close. So we have it scaled between gallery and arcade right now.
Great.
And just even on the openings, here we say on the openings in the arcade, we say they may be rectangular or arched. And on the galleries, we say they may be rectangular but not be arched.
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't want somebody, inventing wooden arches. Well, I mean, I suppose somewhere in the world there's some nice wooden art. Well, there are somewhere in the world nice wooden arches, but this isn't an English church.
Mm-hmm. I think one other I'm sure you guys have thought about it. It's a question what about the signage when it comes to gallery and and arcade? I see an arcade, it's pretty clear you can put between the balcony and the right there, but in the gallery, how would you do signages? Because if they're back on the building, they're kind of a little far from like, people either driving or kind of a little faster mode of travel?
Yeah.
We certainly they're certainly allowed on the windows and on the walls, but I think we cover in the signage that also in galleries, they should be suspended from the gallery above so that the pedestrian, so that as you're walking through. Now, this is an unusually high gallery. I think many of your galleries will not be that tall, so that an overhead sign will be easily readable by the passing pedestrian. But you raise a good point, which is that the gallery is just intended to focus it's intended for the pedestrian, not so much for the drive-by visibility of the signage for motorists. I mean, the purpose of this little downtown is to get people to park and walk around. So I don't know that we want to start encouraging signs on the faces of the galleries, although a sign suspended. Do we want to illustrate that, Andrew? Maybe a sign, if you had a gallery this tall, having a sign suspended in the top of the opening could be very beautiful.
I think that would be a good thing to call out, and then call out the minimum.
Whereas if this horizontal is only 9 feet up, you don't want a sign hanging down very far.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. We should be.
Oh my gosh, it's, short version, it's complicated.
But that's a good layer to call out.
We'll take a look at that tie-in between these projections and the signage standards. Thank you.
Yeah, because there is that one, that one building that has a somewhat narrow arcade now, the white 2-story building, and its signs are really the thing that take the openings, to a way too small proportion. No, and on the site itself now, at Jackson and Homestead, where they just have signs coming way down into the opening. So that is a real concern. So I think that we'll call that out and make that clear and put a dimension on it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Atisha.
Thank
Dan?
you.
You had your hand up next, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. So David, great job. And I just want to, on behalf of this group and our group, Reclaiming Our Downtown, this is it's wonderful. We've read through this, and I want to thank you and Jim and Peter and team for, all you've done here. Now, I may want to hold on the question I want to ask until after the precise plan. Does this conclude the form-based code part of the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless there's any questions, yes, we're done. Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So you've done quite a few of these, and I'm sure you have a top 3. Pardon me. Your top 3 cities that implemented this to your liking. What did those cities do after they received the form-based code to make those successes possible? What were their best practices, or can you walk me through that?
Well, in general, they had people with a strong design background doing the project review, because the language of this code is so much about physical design that in order for an applicant to submit a strong development permit application that is in conformance with the intentions and the regulations, they need an architect who is pretty skillful in design. And in order to do the review on the other end, you need somebody operating at that level, which a lot of cities don't have in-house. So I would say that having a few cities are lucky enough to have somebody in-house with those sorts of design chops, and other cities just retain somebody on a consulting services basis. Ventura retained me for about a decade after we made their form-based code, and quite a few good buildings ensued. And I'm not taking credit for it. It's just that they had the foresight to have somebody who spoke the language, reviewing things.
Got it. So
And of course, the other thing is there needs to be an ongoing political will and administrative determination to, because it's always a little more work to do something really well than it is to do it halfway. Yeah. And so basically everybody has to be ready to just keep putting in the work.
So the tangible steps you follow on, sorry, Adam, the tangible steps that, let's say Santa Clara Council staff, management, what could they take, the steps those folks could take to make this, we want to make this downtown exceptional. We don't want it pretty good, or, we've heard that a lot, and not this council, but past councils. It's not great, but it's pretty good. We don't want pretty good. We want exceptional, excellent. How do we get there?
Well, you say no to crud.
Okay. Got it.
Hey, it's the same thing I've been saying for years. You got to say no a few times.
Yeah,
right. It gets their attention. And there's one remarkable example of a city that has been getting really good buildings very consistently for a long time. Downtown Santa Barbara. And what they had was some brilliant design guidelines prepared by a dear friend and much missed mentor, David Gebhardt, who wrote the guidebooks to the architecture of California. He was an architectural historian of great distinction at UC Santa Barbara. And he wrote the El Pueblo Viejo design guidelines. And then the city had a really highly qualified board of architectural review and a landmarks commission composed of, a bunch of architects that donated their time year after year after year to review it. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that, but word got out that you just don't come in there unless you've got a really good architect. Because you just get a fast no if it's not good.
Yeah.
And the smart money just learn that you don't waste your time. And
Right. And there is, and this is not only, I'm not picking on anybody. It's the public as well. You get a little anxious. You want to see a building slap up and, get going with the downtown. Let's go. And crud, is the result. So,
well, sadly, in this country, that's kind of the norm. But for a special place like downtown Santa Clara, you just need to set a new tone.
I'm going to let my last question is for if Manuel's on the phone or Leslie, I can't see here. Do we have, as far as Santa Clara's experience with form-based code, what is it, and how do you guys feel about this response as far as the review process, et cetera?
So Santa Clara has never had a form-based code that I'm aware of. Our zoning code is from 1969. We have a couple of sets of very old design guidelines. So we're a little behind the times as far as actual documents for us to review projects against. This will be stepping it up for us for sure.
Leslie, they are, you all down there are updating the ordinances.
Correct. Yes.
You're in process. I know COVID kind of threw a wrench in that and a little bit of a delay, but is that going to be coming in 2023? And that might be a question for Rena.
Yeah. No, we have an updated zoning code. It's currently posted on our website. We were hoping to take it to council by the end of this year, but then the state approved a whole bunch of new laws that affected our zoning code. So we're wrapping those in, a bunch of new laws that are effective January 1. So early next year, it should be going to council.
Thank you.
which yes, will also bring our code up to date with definitely some more standards. Not standards like these though. This is a very special code for sure.
So
And
I just last thing, so I want to conclude with just us, we're not going to decide here, but just to keep an open mind on, ways if it is, maybe hiring from the outside or training from within the inside on best practices, what others,
oh,
there are multiple other cities have done this and what they did that maybe, screwed up or they did great or what they do differently, that's
I left out one thing, excuse me. That the process, we often recommend and offer a process of training where we can, and we've talked about that before with Leslie, that we could spend some time going through sample projects with Leslie and some of her colleagues, just in terms of the approach to going through the review. So it's partly a matter of design training, but it's partly just a matter of sort of understanding a different way of vetting projects in relation to a hierarchical set of standards. Yeah, part of it's just the mechanics, and that's certain. I mean, and with that's easily transferable.
Thanks. Rob, go
All right,
ahead.
thank you.
Yeah, yeah, this is the first time I've gone through this. I think I missed the last meeting where, this was put before us. So I'm at page 60 out of the 80 in my review. So I have a fair amount of comments, but I guess I'm going to probably keep it as quick as I can. First thing is, could we put north arrows on any time that the street grid is shown or any plan?
Yeah.
That would be
Thank you.
helpful.
Yeah.
My brain always goes, wait, which exactly is north? Where exactly? So that would be
It's
great.
a hard question in Santa Clara.
Yeah. The other thing, and I love that you have provisions in there for carrying the structural and gridding down to the ground. But if somebody it doesn't leave any room if somebody wants to do something iconic and modern, it doesn't seem to allow, and I always think of the Fred and Ginger in Prague, right? It's something that's certainly outside the box of creative architecture. And so how do we address that? Because I don't want to shut that down, the ability to do something iconic and modern.
Well, I think there's a lot of layers of that. One is that in the rubric we have all set up with this plan is that essentially the public realm, the spaces that are going to be your long-awaited new old downtown are defined by buildings that are relatively flat in their form and relatively continuous in their extent. They create what we call the street wall. So, so the sort of, the buildings that are sort of spiraling up out of the ground into a puff of smoke are not going to do that. However, if a building is fundamentally planar in its aspect in relation to the street, it doesn't have to be flat. It can be moving around. If somebody wanted to do a Mies van der Rohe version of a downtown Santa Clara building, with more glass than we've illustrated here, and wide flange sections, but we're hoping that people aren't going to do buildings that somehow look like they're just magically floating in the air. But if somebody wanted to do, a steel and glass building that created a plane and let you see beautifully into the ground floor and created upper floor residences with lots of windows, you know, that could be cool. I don't think we've precluded that, have we, Andrew?
So I think the place to kind of have this extra level of flexibility for really special architects could potentially be in the deviations from standards section that's right kind of on the third spread in, where we say, you know, how much you can deviate and then required findings. This would be more of a qualitative deviation rather than a percentage. And perhaps on the topic of facade organization and structure, we could put something in for architectural particular buildings. The difficulty is, yeah, we want to make sure we catch the people who, you know, aren't trying to do something special. They're just not sure how to order their building yet. You know, we want to make sure they just order their building and not try too hard.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, so perhaps one way to do it is to keep it kind of tight on the surface, but then, you know, put in the deviation, and then we describe some very specific findings. We would just have to make sure the findings are strict enough that you don't have some of those other developers saying, oh, but you know,
Yeah,
I should just get a deviation.
And
So that
there's some architects who feel that it's their job to break the pattern. And so, you know, at what scale are we talking here? If you're trying to blow a big hole in the street wall and have your building sort of hanging out over the street as though it, you know, resulted from 9/11, you know, not so much. If somebody's trying to make a building with using different materials in different ways to achieve a sort of a textile weaving of vertical and horizontal with textural and material differences from what we had imagined, that could just be totally cool. I mean, that the whole building could be art.
yeah. Well, that's more what I was.
Or it could be a crashing mess.
Well, true. It's a, you know, you got to watch it, but yeah, that was even the building that would be like the food court. I've always thought that could be some sort of jewel, you know, waiting right there as a standalone. And I'm still not happy that it's only showing it at 2 stories. I still think that as long as it's translucent, it could go taller, 3 stories, you know. So, but that's one example where it could be a jewel in terms of its form. That wouldn't be restrictive. So I guess think a little bit about that. The arcades, my biggest pet peeve is when an arcade changes the width and arc, a radius of the arches. To me, they should march on consistently, and they shouldn't vary in width or arc, is my personal opinion.
I tend to agree.
Yeah. So maybe something in there relating to that. I see it done horribly in most residential where everybody wants arched openings, and then there's narrow and wide, and they're the same height of, you know, but they're not.
They're just smearing stucco around on a plan that got elevated.
Yes. So that's something that's pretty sensitive for me. In terms of the post office, is it possible to do historic research and get that thing designated while this is going along? Because it's sort of like an EIR element, right? I mean, we're trying to, I don't know, that was just one thought I had. I'll keep going, but let's see. Using building base height. I don't necessarily agree that the building base heights have to offset, because sometimes in old downtowns, there were sister buildings side by side that had cornice lines that aligned.
Yes, yes.
And so I struggle with being too forceful with that.
I agree. Andrew, can we?
Yeah. So one thing we've changed on that is to differentiate just between increments. So not just pieces of the building that don't need to look like different buildings. You don't need to be varying your base height. But if you have the whole block some of your increments do need to look like different buildings, that's one of the tools you can use to make things look really like a different building. So we kind of give a bag of tricks that you can use. You have to choose, what do we say?
Is it
You have to
mandatory
build-
though, right?
No,
It said-
now
We're
it's just
saying
one of the.
there's like 5 things and you need to pick 3.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so in the situation where where a building wants to look like it's really a distinct building, a part of the project looks like a distinct building, then that's one of the options they choose.
Okay.
And they just have to choose 2 out of the 4 options.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. It's funny, as I read through this, I can slowly connect the dots of, because there's stuff forthcoming as you're reading through, and I'm getting there. And I'll probably just send some comments on separately. I don't want to take a ton of time. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Well, just after you get through it, feel free to send us notes. We'd love,
Okay, I will.
Be very well informed.
Rob, it might be easier that way because, like, I know I have a lot of specific ones as
Yeah.
well, like just in some details. And this document is very big. I mean, started going through it, and like Rob said, you got to kind of connect all the pieces, right? It goes with tables and adjustments and variants and stuff like that. So it's better to kind of read through it, walk away, come back to it, really tie it together. It's not, none of us, like Leslie said, in Santa Clara have been used to something that's this well put together.
Yeah, and I only have two more comments. Okay, so with the reveal of material, it mentions 4 inches of reveal to glass, and I would say change that to jam, because sometimes the glass is set back. We want a full 4 inches, which is a brick, right? Return. We don't want to give them any opportunity to shortchange that, because then you're gonna lose that.
Thank you, Rob.
The integrity, yeah. And then the last was the arcade depth. It says that's 10-foot minimum, but the walk needs to be 8-foot minimum, which only leaves 2 feet for table if somebody's. I know it's a minimum, but my problem is if someone does the minimum and you only leave 2 feet. I mean, that's enough for 2 people to sit at a kind of to dine, but I'm kind of like, well, what's the next bump up? Is it 12 feet minimum so you can get a 4-foot table and seat 4 people? It's just a thought. I'm always trying to get more than just a little, and not to say that the business can't push back in, but I'm trying to make sure it's set up for success if someone doesn't think that far along.
Thank you. We'll look at that.
Yeah, okay. And then I'll just send my rest of my comments, but I'm super excited. I think you have some very good examples. The one I love the most is the garage entry, the brick building with the entry, because if you go down El Camino, you'll see various new buildings where the opening is in and out. It's a double wide, and it messes up the pattern above, and it looks horrible. So that is
so easy to do it well.
Yeah, just super happy. Thank you for all your hard work, everybody. And I'll follow up with notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
Tisha?
I think I just wanted to second some of Rob's comments on leaving some room for modern architecture, and especially some iconic architecture like Jewish Museum or some of these buildings. Someone really wants to make an amazing theater, or the related Santa Clara is having the amazing food court, so we should leave some room for that. And maybe we designate some corners or some special buildings that I'm not an expert here, but like having some of that flexibility will be great in this whole. I feel like the graphics is making it look a little traditional to my taste, but this is my personal taste. Most of the graphics are making it look super traditional, or going kind of not very modern or contemporary architecture. So maybe just.
If you are Rob, by the way, if either of you has pictures of buildings that you think are very successful urbanistically at participating in forming space and are more modern and or flamboyant, lay them on us. I mean, I love modern architecture.
Sure.
And we're constantly on the lookout for great examples of modern buildings that behave in very strong ways urbanistically. And there's just so many that don't.
Yeah, museums and theaters, I think you hit it, Tisha. Museums and theaters are two, because they don't require a lot of windows in the front necessarily. So they can be quite a canvas of, interesting, creative interests. So, yeah. Okay, I'll definitely look.
David and Andrew, I'm wondering if those buildings, and maybe I think it should probably go, the flexibility maybe needs to, and the representation maybe needs to go beyond those buildings, but since both a theater and a performing arts or arts art space are spoken to in this plan, maybe those buildings can be exceptions.
Yes,
and can be treated as exceptions.
I was just thinking the same thing, because in a lot of our codes, we have defined a category that we've called civic buildings. And they can include city halls, churches, community buildings, auditoriums, theaters, museums, that don't need to follow all the same rules that stores and apartments ought to.
I like that. As well as the food court potentially.
Yeah, well, the food court the food court could be the funnest thing of all.
Yep.
I think my other thing, just looking at these graphics, it's reminding me is the idea of plinth. I know we would want things to be as flat as we would from the sidewalk inside the building, but at the same time, there are realities of ventilating the basement. And a lot of times they want the first slab to sit like 3 to 4 feet above the ground, so it's easier to ventilate. So, but just these are like smaller details, and a lot of this, if we want to allow 1 or 2 steps into these storefronts, or we don't want to allow, but it's something that we should very clearly address.
Well, that gets complicated, and that brings us right back to Folsom, by the way. They've got a bunch of elevated sidewalks. I mean, it's historic, and so a lot of them the sidewalks were elevated, so the buildings didn't flood. Mm-hmm. And also, some of them had basements because it's on a sloping site, so they'd have a below the street level that would open out behind, and then anyway. So but the question then is, from a handicap accessibility standpoint and a general, horizontal circulation standpoint, do you want to be setting up, in San Francisco, that makes a lot of sense because you're stepping down. So you got areaways and plinths but I mean, this site's pretty flat. So do you want to be setting it up for that? I don't know. It's just a question.
No, I don't think so. I would prefer it all to be flat, apart from like there are some buildings, as you're talking about theaters and other places where a nice, 7-8 steps are nice, so people can just sit and hang out, like adding part of the space. But I'm working on some projects where it has become very challenging for the mechanical engineers to ventilate. So I'm just talking from that realities of like, most of these buildings might have basements underneath them.
Well, you can have the vent in the sidewalk like that famous Marilyn Monroe shot.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, really, you can have vents in the sidewalks. You can have glass block in the sidewalks.
Okay, so I mean, that's just something, like I was not sure something just because I've missed so much of this precise planning, this planning process. So yeah, but I would prefer it to be as flat as it can be. Like that.
I think that's going to be a lot. It's such a small, this is a small downtown. And if we start jumping the ground plane around, we're going to run out of room.
And then in the general overlay, there's some flexibility where they have more of a setback to have, shop terraces, and they have stoops.
Especially along Benton.
Benton, yeah.
That would be charming. I mean, because everybody across the street is up. Or most everybody.
All right, I got, anyone else? I have a couple items. So I noticed that we're not designating the post office as historical. It mentions that there are historical resources within the boundaries, but I think we are rezoning all of this land, and at this time, it's the time to do it, so we don't have to come back. So I really want to make sure that the post office remains not as a post office, but the building and structure remains there. It's the last surviving building of the downtown, and I think it's very important to people, and it'd be a real tragedy if it got bought, leveled, and an 8-story building got put in its place. I think the community would be very upset about it. So I would like to make sure that that does get designated as a what it is, CT or whatever, the county historical designation. I mean,
HT.
HT, thank you, HT. So I would like to make that comment. I did notice that it's called out but not designated, so I'd like to get that designated. Another thing that I thought was interesting was the director is called out as being kind of the decision maker on deviations from the plan. I would like any deviations of the plan to go to council. Sorry, Andrew, we don't elect the director, but we do elect the city officials. So I think that has come up multiple times that we have asked for the final decision on deviations and modifications to the general plan to go to council. I think that this should also go to council, not to the director. Another thing was, let's see. Can you go to table 5.2? Would you mind? Sorry, it's gonna be easier to talk about the different.
Can I stop sharing my screen and you want to put that up, Andrew?
Yep.
Sure, thanks. And I'll have a bunch more but I just want to go over the high level ones that I think other people will comment on. So I want to make sure that they get their input too. So B, we have the sidewalks. It seems like, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but it seems like Franklin and Lafayette are flipped. So Lafayette has a much bigger sidewalk than.
So this is because, so the sidewalk is already built into the right of way in the precise plan for Franklin. And so the 0 to 5 is just how much wiggle room they have in addition to that 20-foot sidewalk.
Beyond the right of way.
Exactly.
Why are we asking for so much more right of way on Lafayette then?
So Lafayette has a smaller, that's to, I think, in terms of what is already given to the sidewalk. After that, we're not requiring shop fronts all the way down. You can have some calibratable frontage space on Lafayette. So that would be either extension of the sidewalk or it's kind of your calibratable space on Lafayette.
So the intention is to have enough room between the curb and the building. And a lot of room between the curb and the building is already built into Franklin.
Okay.
It is not yet, the curb and the property line, excuse me.
Because Lafayette's existing.
Right, so there's not enough room between the curb and the property line in Lafayette, so we're asking them to push the building back.
Okay.
So there's enough room between the curb and the building to have landscape and pedestrians.
Yeah, this is all right.
Okay. No, I just want to make sure. You see what I'm saying? Like it just seems like it's. And I even looked at the cross sectional with the right of way. I think it's 75-80 feet for Franklin. So, and then another really big one is figure 6.1 and 6.2, the heights. So the heights had been changed from June to just recently. We got these updated heights, and I kind of wanted to go through them because were tweaked a little bit. But this and please, just so you all know, it's part of it is the community, right? I want to do the argument now with the community and get everybody out and get their opinions versus when the development plan comes up, we won't have a chance, right? It'll be a little too late. And so I would like to understand a little bit more about what the methodology is for getting those heights, for a 3-story, 4-story, 7-story and such, because you obviously have the retail component on the first floor, which is going to be a higher sill plate, but then going up, for residential, it's gonna, you know, get reduced because obviously you don't need the same volume space in a residential unit as you would in a commercial unit. So yeah, I just like to understand a little bit.
But we're also, I'll just make one general comment and then let Peter and Andrew cover it. We wanted to make sure that at the same time we're requiring enough height in the ground floor that it's gracious and flexible and beautiful. We also don't want to just squish, we don't want to require extra low ceilings on the upper floors for two reasons. One, that when you have smaller apartments, a taller ceiling is a great amenity. And there's, at least in my mind, there's a thought that with the way that workplace and residents are kind of merging and shifting and swirling these days, we wouldn't, if somebody built a building with the intention of, you know, floors 5, 6, 7, and 8 being housing, and then at some point somebody thought it would be better to have them be office, we don't want to have the structure, you know, so tight that that's just not reasonably possible. To downtown Los Angeles, where we are, is full of buildings that have like 9-10 foot to the bottom of structure, and they were historically built as offices, but a lot of them have been turned into loft apartments, and they could go the other way over. Anyway, okay, that's it. But
And I know Peter has some slides that'll tackle some of those changes. And so maybe once we go over that, we'll go over where some floor maximums have changed. And then we could maybe return to the detailed topic of how we added those, how we calibrated the floors to feet. So maybe we, continue on that after Peter's done.
Yeah,
Okay.
or we could, yeah, I mean, I have a presentation, I have a short presentation just updating some height thinking on the Western blocks, but I think we could actually address this question about the height breakpoints and the logic there. Andrew, do you have, I can share
Okay,
screen.
we
Oh,
can
you
go
have it
through
up,
it now. I mean, I have a couple other questions. but we
Okay,
can
go ahead
through
then. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's whatever you want to do. It's fine. We can go through it now.
So I'm not sure I'm going to get this exactly right, but I think beginning at 4 stories. Okay, thank you, Andrew. So the 2 and 3 story buildings, we were assuming 16-foot ground floor, which could be a ground floor retail space, you know, sort of a live workspace, or could be, as you know, as came up earlier in this conversation, could be a building that's elevated a little bit above street level, a residential entry that is elevated above street level. So you're giving a little bit of give. We're talking about our live work and our townhouse units. Then once you get into a 4-story building, we're wanting to enable the generous ground floor, which can actually be equivalent to 2 10-foot levels of parking that are built to be adaptable to other uses should that happen. So we're wanting to assume that 20-foot ground floor and then 13-foot upper floors, which are sort of a good benchmark for office uses. But we're also saying with the height that it is that both the stories and the feet are operating as maximums. So you can't go up to 59 feet and do 6 pinched residential stories. You can do up to 4 stories, period. But those 4 stories, and this is part of the story of trying to maintain land use flexibility, so that we're always enabling that office user to come in, or that generous ground floor height that's going to provide that really good restaurant space. But we're not then allowing the building to fly, you know, we're not allowing a 6-story residential building in that same volume.
Yeah.
Got
So
it. That makes more sense, and your footages make sense. I kind of understand the logic. Where is it detailed that says that you cannot, you know, use more than 4 stories in 59 feet, for instance? Like in the plan,
it's in the policy language, but perhaps it could be clearer. So that is good feedback.
Yeah, maybe I missed it reading through it, but I was like, man, I can just see them attaching to the height and then squeezing them in. And I was trying to do the math, you know, because the other thing is in table 6.2, your heights call out for 14 foot from floor to floor with, I think it's a maximum for the ground floor, and 12-foot floor to ceiling for the residential components. And so that's kind of where I was trying to figure out how you came up with the math and some of the table stuff. When I took that from the max, I'm like, I can't figure it out.
Yeah. So really a lot of those are minimum. So it's really that the stories are going to limit you. And this is this generous number that if you have these wonderful tall stories or you have office, you're going to fit comfortably within it. But the primary kind of limiter for most people are going to be the number of stories. So we can, I think we can make that more clear. Okay. We tried to do it by switching what's in the parentheses versus not, but I think we can make sure.
Yeah, no worries. I just want to make sure that it's clear for them, right? Because they're already
the minimums. Yeah, the minimums are much less. These are kind of the generous. Yeah,
and that kind of helps me with one of my other questions, which was going to be on the first floor. What's limiting somebody from doing like a 20-25 foot big voluminous retail restaurant, grand, building space, right? Because to David's point, having that volume in even just a retail space makes it a much more inviting space to be in and everything. So, nobody wants to be in a cave. I still think that they are a little bit higher than what I think was expected. So if you go up to, there's one area on this plan that I think we should probably be, or at least I'm pretty concerned about, which is the 7 stories of red along what would be Main Street, kind of going out there. So that is pretty tall going that way on the bonus section. I don't think it's a problem. Yeah, just that section is the section that worries me the most, because there are residential units right on the other side. I know there's an office and kind of a commercial, but it's still pretty close to that side. Whereas on the south side, it's the Liberty Towers and other multifamily units. So it's not quite as impactful. Plus the shading with the south, right? So just that was my only other thing, because when you bumped it up, 98 feet is pretty tall. So
yeah, it's a good point. And we've been modeling those as residential buildings. So the models that we've been looking at have shorter floor plates, and so they wouldn't look that tall. We haven't been modeling, but we are trying to say that the plan has land use flexibility, that those could be office buildings if they need to, if that's what the market wants to provide there.
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to, we don't need more office buildings in Silicon Valley. Unfortunately, they keep building them and building them. I mean, I just took over 400,000 square feet in Sunnyvale recently, and it's like, well, the area that I'd been working there years and years ago, and it was all one floor tilt ups, and I haven't been back in like 6 years, and I took these over, and almost all of them are gone, and they're now all 4 to 8 story office buildings. And we continually hear in meetings about how we have a housing shortage, but we somehow keep building more and more office spaces. So it doesn't make sense. It's like, well, you can't, maybe you should stop approving office if we don't have the housing to support it. So I'm a little concerned that and I know flexibility is good, because we've talked about flexibility for like converting parking structures over time into housing and whatnot, but flipping housing to office space, I think I get having the flexibility, but I would be very concerned with doing that, because I think we need the people, especially if we want the retail, right? And then another one was, let's see, did that one? Oh, table 9.2 minimum. It said minimum. I think it's a typo. It says minimum 15 feet between entries on the ground floor, right down there, table 9.2, frequency of building entries, and it says minimum distance. I would think that would be maximum.
Thank you.
Hey, look at that.
Thank you.
I was scratching my head. I'm like, why would 50? Like, that's a big, if you have 50 by 100 or something, that'd be 5,000 square feet.
That's max to ensure, you're exactly right, to ensure good frequency of building entries. Yep.
So that there's a good rhythm of the retail shops, and you're not getting fatigue, right?
Thank you.
Sorry, I know it's a little one, but it is.
No, but that's good. That's why it's great that's why it's great that we're having all of you. Yeah. Yep.
Means the new max.
That usually doesn't happen, but that one got through.
Yeah, no worries. And then I know that we talked about this kind of a little bit last meeting. I know you weren't part of it, but how do we quantify bonus value? So we talk about the bonuses all the time, but at the end of the day, no matter what, it's a monetary value. At the end of the day, whether it's land, it comes down to money. If it's art, it comes down to money. If it's affordable housing, it comes down to money. What I don't want to do is have a perceived value, because everyone has a different perceived value of different things. I want the real market value to be justifiable to getting the bonus that they're asking for. So what I don't want to do is say, hey, here's a little pocket park, and by the way, I'm taking an entire 2 acres up another 4 stories to maximize my density bonus. Well, no, I mean, that's not, you know, and I don't know if it's a scale, like it's a slider and you have to hit certain benchmarks, or it's a percentage of the overall project. Like if you figure out, you know, rough square footage costs are fairly reasonable to know in the market at the time from a constructability. And so having even just using those rough ones, I mean, we have nexus studies for other things. I just want to make sure we quantify it monetarily, whether or not they put it in, like I said, arts, historic resources, whatever, that's fine, but it needs to be quantified. It can't, because otherwise who's going to make the decision?
Yeah. Right now, the plan, that table, you'll see the note that's sort of as far as the plan goes in that regard. It says bonuses are provided at city discretion, and bonuses should be commensurate with the level of community benefit contribution.
Yeah, I know, but that leaves it very vague. It's whoever's perceiving it at the time.
Maybe this is an opportunity for there to be a valuation program put in place after plan adoption, so sort of parallel to the conversation we were having earlier about what's public art, and the fact that that requires, you know, a good deal of thought by people who know a lot about art. We went through a very similar conversation on this with, well, actually, when we were doing a very similarly sized plan for an expansion to Claremont Village, and our economists strongly recommended that it simply be exactly what you say, Adam. You just convert it to dollars and just see what's equal to what.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, is it equal, or is it, or do we, or I mean, I think this is actually a really good question. I really like the idea, David, of having a program that kicks off as an implementation effort. Plan is adopted. Now we have to really dial this in and assign value. I do think it's a question of, do you want it to be equal value, or do you want to actually try to encourage, stimulate the use of the bonus so you make it a little bit worthwhile?
Yeah, whatever that logic is, then just right. The calculation, it just gets converted to dollars, I think, just like Adam said.
I just know with all of my discussions with developers thus far, you know, on multiple projects, they've always said, if we just know the rules before engagement, it's much easier for us because we just build it into the formula and we move forward. And the whole point of doing the form-based code and the precise plan, but really the form-based code, was to try to dial in the constraints and the requests from the community, so that, again, we're not battling every single development. It's really more of a, hey, we've clearly defined what our vision is for the downtown. Yeah, maybe you need to make some slight adjustments, but it's not like we're starting from their vision and then trying to muscle it into our vision. We're starting with our vision, and they have to convince us that their vision is slightly better than ours.
Yes.
So that's all. I mean, I just want to make sure we set the rules very clearly, and that we're being fair to all developers, right? I mean, we don't want to give one person a benefit that we're not going to give to another person, because, you know, that's just, it's not fair.
Well,
so
the way we often describe this sort of plan is that the community and the city in this case is doing developers the courtesy, the great courtesy, and providing something of great economic value to the developer in the form of knowing what the rules are before they start playing the game.
Yeah, we just want everybody to be on the same rule. You know, nobody, oh, well, you pass go, you get 1,000 this time, 1,500 next time. Maybe if I land on free parking, I get all the money in the middle. I mean, house rules, right? No, I think we should all share the rule book and all be on the same page. That's all. So that way it is a real I want it to be positive. I think everybody does, right? So
Right. I mean, we want developers to make a good amount of money by making you a gorgeous downtown.
exactly.
Bingo.
Yeah, I don't care how much they make, if they make it, you know, if they make it to the community's use and liking, I guess. You know, you're not going to please everybody, but the majority. And I got one more thing, and I saved this one for last because I know I'm going to get, you know, pummeled here. Table 10.1. Balconies. I hate them. And I know other people like them, but I continually see, and even in the recent proposal that we've had, balconies, especially as we're starting to talk about really tall buildings, they become, you know, vantage points into the surrounding area. So if we decide to put in balconies, I would like to at least strategically limit the view from, you know, looking outward in, you know, into the residential community, looking out towards the airport and the university. Sorry, Butch, is fine. But I still also think I mean, I personally would rather get rid of them. I always think they look like appendages. They're storage for people. I very rarely see anyone out there on any of the balconies while I'm driving down El Camino or the other streets. So
So Adam, are you talking balconies strictly on residential, or are you also talking on commercial property?
probably anything, right? I mean, especially as we're talking about 70 foot plus buildings, right? I mean, that's a pretty far vantage. And now I'm not against roof, you know, I really love like rooftop amenities or, you know, enclaves to look out, but as long as they're not looking out and inhibiting the privacy of someone else, then absolutely. Like if you're looking out to the commercial or looking out towards the university, I mean, the university is gorgeous. Look that way.
Yeah.
Didn't we talk one time about having the balconies facing the alleyways instead of the main streets?
Yeah.
We did, yeah.
I actually don't mind it on the main street, like Franklin. That's where you want to do all the people watching, right? And you're not actually affecting anybody. Like when I walk down Santana Row, I don't feel like when I walk down there and people are out on the balconies or out on the terraces that there's any kind of like, it's not impacting as a pedestrian or in you know, my experience, but it's mostly just for the existing residents as they're around, because we do have a couple that are really close, and I just want to make sure we're being sensitive.
Okay.
So can we denote it for, pardon me, by street? I mean, actual locations?
So like, I mean,
recessed patios as opposed to the balcony. I mean, why do
I
we,
like recessed ones? Yeah.
New York City doesn't have very many balconies that I can recall going down most of those streets. Sure, some beautiful rooftop structures, you can see them from apartments, but you want people to come down. And I would think there'd be an amenity if it's a housing complex. There's going to have a roof terrace or something, or I don't know.
So like, you know, Rob, like the Benton, right? The Benton has an amazing rooftop terrace, right? We walked it, it's like all teak floor, built-in lounge chairs into the ground. I mean, it's amazing. Double-sided fireplace. I was like, if I could afford $5,400 a month for a 2-bedroom, I'd be all over it. No maintenance. But, you know, they have limited balconies, right? So they still have that outdoor space. They had an outdoor barbecue area, a fire pit, a hot tub, pool. They had a kitchen where you could throw parties. They had a little garden and zen area up there. I mean, they had it maxed out for there. So there was still plenty of outdoor space for the occupants without having to have that little private, you know, basically bike and plant storage. I hate to say it, but that's what it ends up being.
Well, that's what a lot of them turn into.
Yeah,
Well, that's the
I don't want to look
problem.
at that while I'm down there. I want to look at the architecture, not a bunch of stuff hanging down.
But hotels, we've talked about this, a hotel where you have constant turnover, nobody's going to collect anything out there. They're going to put a nice table and chairs or something. The Benton, from what I recall, do the balconies, and that's more of a warehouse district kind of element, but do those just face El Camino, Adam? Those steel balconies with the struts?
I think they only face El Camino. I know they don't face Alviso.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure. I mean,
yeah,
it's just I saw the sizes and everything, and it's just, you know, it already came up with the proposal that we've already received, where there's a bunch of balconies and rooftop terraces that are literally overlooking the single family residence behind. And so I just saw this and didn't really see, I guess I just want a little more guidance on where to place them, really. I mean,
And Liberty
I won't
Towers.
wage war against getting rid of them, but
Adam, Liberty Towers is a classic example
there you
of
go.
storage balconies. I mean, it's 7 stories of storage balconies.
I think I've seen
Well, at
3
least you
people
get
out there
color
in
out of
10
it.
years.
They benefit. I mean, they get outside. I get that. But it's a delicate design element.
But I've
Where
only
is-
seen like 3 people ever out there. I mean, in the 10, 12 years I've lived down here, and almost 40 years of living in the city, I very rarely see anybody out there.
Well, where's Liberty Towers? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Oh,
On
right,
Homestead.
right south of Block F.
Maine and Homestead.
It's the
Or-
tall building.
The 11-story Russian
Gross building.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know the name of it. Yeah, okay.
looks great.
Sometimes some of those result, some of the storage balconies result because a plan gets a private an on-site open space requirement that starts pushing developers into building balconies on units that maybe the market doesn't warrant that, or maybe the climate doesn't warrant that, but they're kind of forced into it. So, at least, we do have the base step of, not requiring them to be providing that sort of kind of forced open.
Yeah, just think about it. I mean, it's just food.
But it's
Oh,
It's a
sorry.
good point.
You're breaking up.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, you're breaking up. No, you're breaking up. I can't hear you. Sorry, that's why I jumped in. I
We couldn't hear
apologize.
you.
It's okay. It's okay.
Andrew, I think it was a good point. It was about, we're not requiring the provision of private open space, which is in some cases maybe driving the creation of those balconies, which people don't actually use.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of cities in my experience had the idea that every unit should have, like 60 or 80 square feet of private open space. And so you get buildings that are just deformed because the architects are trying to poke stuff out and notch stuff in. And it just tears up the architecture. But so here we're not requiring it. So that's a start. And then the question would be, might we want to restrict them in certain locations? Like for instance, on the back sides of buildings, on the north side of Franklin, that if you're on the 7th floor, you might be overlooking the neighborhood to the north, across Benton. Although, I mean, well, that's a long ways away unless you got a telescope. And well, anyway.
I get it, but I'm just, it's also part of just knowing what's going to come.
Yeah, I hear you. No, it's a legitimate concern. Let us think about that, please. Thank you.
No
Thank
worries. And again, I think we should strive for like rooftop amenity, like communal spaces that are outside, like 100%, zero. Like again, just make sure the vantage point isn't looking in, but into the residential neighborhood. But that's an easier one where you have a larger space and you either put up a wall or some kind of a, structure or something that blocks the view of a certain vantage point, but the rest of it, it's there. And then you're not building so many small open spaces, you're building a bigger one. I mean,
no, we couldn't agree more. We couldn't agree more. And
I guess at least put in, I guess I would say at least put in, we strongly would encourage communal open spaces over balconies, individual private balconies. But if you really want a balcony, these would be the locations. And I think that's kind of.
And we talked about screening, Adam, that they weren't open railings necessarily. They were more opaque, which, maybe would discourage it in some ways, right?
Yeah.
That can end up looking kind of heavy, and it depends on how you design it.
Yeah.
It can end up just like looking like stucco boxes.
Yeah. Communist housing.
Yeah, right. We don't want the Moscow look.
No.
I will send the rest of the comments in an email, but those were just the hot ones in case anybody else wanted to comment on them. I wanted to be able to state them with everybody.
And we can encourage bay windows over balconies as well, just as guideline language.
I'm not a bay window fan guy either.
What are you a fan of?
I'm a fan of commercial, industrial, nice looking buildings. I don't know. I mean, you know, I like a lot of stuff. I like open spaces. I still don't have my rooftop bar in the city. Waiting.
I think one thing, Adam, I just wanted to add to your comment about doing these calculations and adding value to bonuses. I'm not sure how to do it, but like certain things have more value in certain markets and then they'll lose value like in 5-year cycle. So how do we, this plan is going to get implemented over like 10, 15 years or more. So how, like somehow to have some flexibility in defining bonuses and how they get updated.
Yeah, that's why I really think it should be tied to the percentage of the cost of the project, because that way it's a floating cost, right? If the market's down, it's not fair to ask for, 30% of the actual cost of the structure, right? And at the same token, in 20 or 30 years from now, it's not good to ask for 0.05% of something, right? So I think tying it to the rough cost of the work is good. I mean, and here, here's the thing, you can always tie it to the permit cost because they have to tell you what the value is on the permit cost, even though they're lying to you.
No.
I mean, but at least that gives you a benchmark, right? I mean, it's got to be somewhat realistic, right? It can't be way out of left field. But I don't know how you would get that metric, but and keep it floating. But that's one way you could do it.
Last time we talked about the Precise Plan in Mountain View, the Wisham, and I did take a look at their community benefits program, and they actually did a study. Strategic Economics did their study, and then the council adopted a resolution approving that value for a bonus. And they did adopt a number value that needed to be evaluated each year. But so that's how they did it, is they actually had a economic firm do the study and then adopted a value and then had a process for adjusting it every year.
So you want to do more work. Perfect. I like it.
I don't want to do more.
Can I just jump in?
Can
I just jump in because I opened the East Westman door. I'm just not surprisingly, we've had 3 residential projects crash because they couldn't afford the fees. So that there's tremendous benefit in thinking about how to capture that for the public, the value of this process of rezoning, investing in downtown. It's just always hard. And so you can't get too much more consistent than Strategic Economics in Santa Clara County. And I would argue they maybe got it a little bit wrong, or the market doesn't stay exactly where you are when you do your static model assessment of the anyways, just a cautionary note on figuring out how to do that, because it can have unintended consequences.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with you, man. That's why I'd rather have it floating too with market conditions, but I just don't know how to get that metric, especially with most government initiatives. They need some kind of study to be the benchmark, right? But then the problem is now we're stuck in the ground at this certain location and the market changes wildly sometimes. So like we're probably going to see here in the next year or so. And
can I just say from experience that there's no way to market.
Thanks.
There really isn't, and it's hard to game it, and it's hard to second guess it. And what it means is that you have periods where you're standing in the way, and you have periods when you're not capturing the full value, and you err on the side of hoping your sweet spot doesn't stop stuff, and it means it's probably a little bit lower than you can get at the peak, and it probably slows you down at the trough, and that's just the reality.
And unfortunately, in Santa Clara, I think we've seen Thanksgiving dinner left on the table too many times. So
my job is to get more.
I know your job is to get more housing.
If I am saying this out loud in a public space, you should.
I appreciate it. No, I just we don't want to be stifling, but we also don't want to give away everything before we even start, right? So I think we're all on the same page of a balance. Anna, you had your hand up. I'm sorry. Did you have something or are you good?
Oh, I just wanted to suggest, like, I am kind of pro balcony. Sorry to say, Adam, but in my
All right.
travels in Western Europe, I rarely saw people store things on the balcony, and that could be related to the rules of the building, you know. And a lot of some of the places I stayed, the hotels, the balconies were very shallow, and so I could open these beautiful French doors, but I'm really not going to stand out there. But I still had that sensation I was part of the outside. So like anything, it's just good design, designing for that that clean look, you know. But looking at so many of these pictures of Barcelona hotels and apartments, it's actually a beautiful architectural feature, the way they designed them in front of the windows and with the trim around it. It makes the building look very attractive. So again, it just goes down to good design. If we can somehow include rules about good design for balconies, maybe we can avoid the problems that you're suggesting, because I've seen those problems, and they are an eyesore. But
well, that's they raise a very good point. That's a very distinct, easily defined balcony type. I mean, so we always think in terms of types, and the type you're talking about, sometimes it's called a Juliet balcony, but it's the balcony that you see in Barcelona and Paris that is simply to prevent you from falling out of a 5th floor French door.
exactly.
And that's completely different than a balcony that you go out and have lunch on with your friends, or, you know, store 7 rusting bicycles on.
Right.
So I mean, we can, if we refine the standards for balconies, the first thing to do would be to define the difference between a balcony that's simply to protect a window that goes close to the floor from being a danger, versus balconies that are intended for, you know, people to be out on them.
And David, in Latvia, which is where I visited a lot, some of the buildings, the reveal of the material is deep enough that they actually put a railing within the reveal, versus needing to project out, and then they still have the French doors. So you kind of benefit, you eliminate the storage balcony because it's their apartment. You have the safety factor, and it's just done really well. I also don't think, maybe we're mass consumers in this country. I just think people don't collect as much. Where I visited, it's not the same. But yeah.
I think we should give storage rooms in these units.
Yeah.
Where we give balconies.
Yep.
I mean, I've lived in apartments and there is not
Yep.
bike storages, like a lot of older buildings where we see these balconies becoming crap storages, because now you have 3 kinds of trash cans, and your kitchens are not designed to have 3 kinds of trash cans. So 2 ends up in the balcony. Your bike and your strollers end up in the balcony. So I think it's a bigger question of how these apartments are equipped than just like balconies becoming storage. And a lot of times balconies are designed to be storages because they're not a space you can enjoy. They're just the way they're designed. Like California Bay Area, I would say, is the biggest example of very poorly designed balconies.
Yes.
So now you know why
That's
I
why
don't
they
like
end up
them.
become storages.
You don't think they're having this conversation in Barcelona and saying, oh, I was just in the Bay Area and their balconies are so great.
So
I
big.
don't
It's
think
great.
Barcelona
Put our
says
bikes out
anything in
there.
California is that great.
Yeah, they do.
All
I
right.
mean, in India, balconies rarely become crap spaces, honestly. India has so much crap, but balconies are where people live their lives.
I saved that one for last because I knew it was going to be a hot one. But it's all right. Like I said, I'm not going to kill them. I just want to be sensitive to other people's.
I just have an overarching question, and this is also because the gap I had. So once we have the form-based code adapted with the precise plan, will we also need the zoning update, or like the long zoning update? Or how soon can someone start using this document as
Well,
a
this is
regulatory
the zoning.
document?
This is the zoning.
This is the zoning. So, okay, so
Yeah, that's the change we switched in midstream. Originally, the scope was we were going to have guidelines that went with the zoning, but now we just made it all one thing.
great, thank you.
Which is with the idea of encouraging investment by making things clear.
Yeah. That's why I was bringing up the historical designation for the post office, because this is the time for the zoning. This is
So
it.
Adam, did we settle the balcony issue? Are we talking about Juliet balconies on certain streets and maybe regular, more?
We're gonna let the professionals go back and look at the types and the locations and all that and figure out what the best strategy is, but they're gonna take our comments, I assume, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt has a great background right now of.
Yeah, look at him.
Juliet
Look at him.
balcony, Right? I mean, that's a total, I mean, yes, those are amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they can be really cool, and that's why I don't think it's good to just say no, but we've seen them done wrong more times than right.
Yeah.
And this is such an interesting conversation. I'll go real short here. But so you can have balconies that really don't project, except that it's a railing that sticks out enough that you can get the windows open and closed and, lean out and look down a little bit. And then there's balconies that are fully recessed, that are almost like rooms of the building that just don't have a wall. And those can really just tear up the facade. They can just be a lot of big holes in the building. And you can have balconies that just jut out like a bunch of things just stuck onto the front. But you can also have ones that are partially recessed and stick out a little bit. So we'll look at the range and come back with some suggestions in the same way we looked carefully at last time you brought up the question of the galleries. We looked more closely at those and refined that. We can do the same pretty simply for balconies.
Thank you. All right, does anybody have anything else before we jump to the public? I should ask David and team, do you have anything else to present before? No, okay. I just want to make sure. Sorry, I should have checked with you first.
Peter, did you have some things you wanted to show?
Well, should we go right into, there's just a short proposal to adjust the building heights. Do we go into that now, Leslie, or do we take public comments first?
Go ahead. Why don't we do it now and then we'll go to public and they.
I just had one quick comment, clarification.
Go for it.
Looking on page 10, and this is just semantics. When we're talking about building heights on page 10, it says buildings along neighborhood edges, particularly along Benton, Madison, and Homestead, must be scaled down. But then when you go to page 23 in the chart, we talk about the different heights. My concern is that going to confuse somebody to say, wait a minute, you're saying everything on Homestead should be short, similar to what we're doing on Benton, but in the chart, you're saying we can go up as high as 9 or 10 stories. So just semantics on the Homestead part of must be scaled down might be changed or eliminated.
Yeah, so that's the just for reference, that's kind of the intent of the code section. That's not supposed to be regulatory. So I think a key bit of that is to make that sound less regulatory, because the way we have it worded right now sounds more like a rule. It's more that the intent is that a lot of those edges are reacting to the story. So yeah, point taken.
Right, because we do mention compatibility around historic neighborhoods, and when we discussed it, it was whatever's across the street you can match, but defining what a neighborhood is could be multiple blocks. So that just was a conflict between the two pieces of information in the document.
Thanks.
Thank you, Butch. All right. We'll move. Oh, we want to go to the heights.
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah.
Great.
All right,
So
I'll go to public comment.
hopefully this is pretty quick and pretty straightforward, but I want to walk through this with you all. I'm going to share screen. So, obviously we've gone over and over and over and pushed and pulled these building volumes, and I think have come to a good place, a place of agreement around urban form, stepping down to the edges, like which just drew attention to just now, but also ensuring solar access to to the neighborhoods and solar access to the public spaces that we want to provide downtown. And most recently, the conversation with you all was around stepping down a little bit more to the western end of the district and sort of creating a more nuanced transition, I would say, from east to west in terms of heights. So we did that and we worked on that, and I think it ended up in good shape. The sort of other perspective on this that we've tried to maintain throughout the process is, how do we create an overall building envelope that that creates a pleasing urban form for the community, but also is financially feasible? And so that's been this sweet spot that we're trying to reach throughout the process. And so our approach has been to establish base maximum building heights that are financially feasible, that we think would be usable by developers to produce the kind of buildings that we're envisioning. And base maximum bonus heights, which more or less reflect sort of the outer envelope of the community, of sort of community acceptability of building heights, and also enable some of those special things, some of those special features, whether it be a theater or additional contributions to public space or transit that are important for the plan. So we never fully defined, I think, what financial feasibility sort of like the floor would be, but I think 70 units per acre, that's what the 70 here refers to as units per acre, is probably pretty reasonable, because it's, according to the analysis that unfortunately was done at a specific point in time, and the market changes, we have to acknowledge that, but 70 units per acre was seen as potentially feasible for rental multifamily, definitely feasible for ownership multifamily. These being the two most likely residential building types that we would be seeing that can be spoken of in terms of market feasibility. Affordable housing sort of has a different reality. So, and then I guess also just important to say, residential for sale townhomes were found to be financially feasible. We do see a place for those in the district, in certain parts of the district, but we do understand those to be feasible. So now we're focusing in on the western blocks of the district here, with Jackson, Monroe, and Madison being the main cross streets. And the draft plan, the building height that you've looked at, purple here indicates floors that would be allowed under the base maximum building height, and the yellow floors, in the case of residential, primarily residential buildings, yellow is indicating floors that would be allowed as a bonus scenario, in a bonus scenario, with the addition of community benefits. And this diagram here is the resulting building heights diagram, with heights represented in terms of stories, and then in parentheses in terms of feet. But the main regulatory metric would be stories. So what happened, I think, is that as we tried to continue to push and pull and address concerns, we brought density down in the western blocks to try to bring that modeled building form sort of down to the neighborhood scale. And as a result, the base maximum density, which floated down along with the bonus maximum that we were modeling, the base maximum has resulted in potentially financially infeasible buildings. And so that violates one of our fundamental ideas, which is that we want to make buildings that are we want to create conditions that are financially feasible for development. So that's taking place on blocks G and H, and then potentially on block J. And we're talking just about the portions of these blocks that would be planned for potential future development. So, so not the post office. We're not anticipating any development of the post office. We're giving that a very low height limit for a good reason. We're not anticipating development on the westernmost portions of the western blocks of greater than a single family or attached single family, or perhaps live work kind of a scale. But elsewhere on these blocks, we would anticipate development, and it's not looking like it would be financially feasible under this base maximum. And as you can see, we're showing this as a 3-story base maximum building on blocks G and H. And that's actually lower than the most recently developed building in that part of the district, this 4-story building at Monroe and Franklin. So it is an indication that we may have gone a little bit too low for the base maximum. So our proposed adjustment shown here would, and I think it's more clearly shown here as in a comparative way, in order to address that issue of financial feasibility, we are suggesting that the committee consider allowing an additional story. So these hatched lines here are representing a story that would be converted from allowable under the bonus to allowable under base maximum. So essentially on block G and block H, and is this block J? Allowing future development parcels to have one additional floor of allowed height under the base scenario. So instead of being a 3-story maximum, these would be 4-story maximums. And for these corner buildings at Franklin and Monroe, and I think we discussed together the concept of this being a little bit of a gateway corner, that it serves that way now. Certainly, it literally has a gateway at Franklin Square, but that it probably continues to be because of the functionality of Monroe Street in Santa Clara, probably does continue to be kind of a gateway, that we do allow those buildings actually to go up one level in terms of the base height, but also go up one level in terms of bonus height, to have a place for those community benefit bonuses to land on those blocks, essentially. And if we were to do this, our units per acre measure, our density measure on these blocks would rise above 70, where we feel comfortable that we're in a range of likely financial feasibility.
Peter, I
We're
got a
talking about
question real
Franklin
quick.
Mall, correct?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So that's a Franklin Mall block.
Yes, G and H are the Franklin Mall blocks with the post office on them as well.
Got it. Okay. Sorry, Adam.
No, you're good. Can you jump back to the like isometric drawing or the 3D? Yeah, there you go. Are you in all of this document, are we showing the correct amount of floors in the area? Because
We're showing the amount that's represented here on what we're saying when we say draft plan.
Adjustment. Yeah, but like, so because when you cut up, and maybe Rob, you can help me explain. Here's a perfect example. I guess
the Sage project.
Top right, the bottom floor on the corner of Homestead and Monroe, right? In the draft plan, yeah, there you go. That building right there. You see how you have, that's the retail on the bottom, so that's one floor, and then you can just see a little piece. It shows, not, we'll go left, like wrap around the building the other way.
And the
It shows
return.
two slices there. So I just want to make sure we're not adding to confusion, because I know that you clarified that the overall height and floor quantity is maxed out, and the additional height is there to allow the flexibility of, design in a building. But when somebody looks at this, it looks like it's almost 2 floors, and so now that's 4, not 3. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I just want to make sure that we're keeping consistency through the document, because I don't want somebody to point and say, well, look, it shows 2 floors here. I'm like, well, no, it doesn't. I mean, another example actually is even actually on the corner of Monroe and Block G, which is Benton, you have 3 of the purple, right? And then only one layer looks like it's going over. So it looks like that's a 2-story section. And I know it's something small, but again, it's just something that when the developers are looking through this, they're going to latch on to whatever they choose to latch onto. And so I think it would be really good to just make sure the retail section is all one level.
Yeah, we need to be really clear about how double height retail floors are calculated.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Great point.
I got a question. So so the Benton Monroe height increase is 1 floor. Is that correct?
Benton, Monroe,
Right there where the arrow is.
right here.
Yeah.
We would basically be converting what would be allowed under the bonus scenario would now be within the maximum base height.
What would the total floor number be?
4, 3/1.
3/1, okay. And then Sanjeev's building or Sage or whatever you call it, that's 5 currently or 4?
That's
4.
4.
That's 4, okay.
So
Just
so
work.
it would essentially match that scale.
Okay, and then, and Adam, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, that's probably less sensitive of a design to the neighbors, the way it looks right now because of the setbacks, than where you were talking, where, you know, Homestead and Monroe are. That would be jumping from 4 to 5 stories, is that correct?
This would be
Yeah,
jumping from 3 to 4 under the base
3
maximum.
3 to 4,
Mhm.
okay. Okay, got it.
Because 2/1 is really just not likely to be feasible.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, and what's
understood.
across the street is the church,
Yep, I agree.
multifamily, rental, commercial, so
Yep,
I don't
yep.
think it's too,
It's
you know,
less critical than Benton.
well, I mean, yeah, I don't want to, yeah.
It doesn't
I
shade.
think it integrates, I guess is the better, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to say less critical, it's all critical.
So last question. So if we do the 4 stories or, you know, the 3/1, that now becomes financially feasible to developers, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, using the information that we have, that we've been building this plan around, that's our best sense of where financial feasibility lives.
Got
It's
it.
very common.
Yep.
No height has changed, as it says in the bottom right corner. The overall height, no overall height change. So basically, you're just taking, you had a 2-floor bonus originally, you're taking 1 and putting in the base.
Right.
Okay.
So a developer could come in without without providing any additional community benefits and could do a financially feasible 4-story building.
Definitely. I mean, we want it to be feasible, so
Right.
I think it's a good move.
Me too. I agree.
Well, remember that the feasibility study was done at literally the peak.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but construction costs have significantly been reduced through, you know, commodity. Lead times are still way up, but commodities and labor, unfortunately, probably won't be going down either, but they have dropped a little bit. So, but they will probably go up by the time this area goes in. So I don't think it's I mean, thinking that Franklin Mall is going to be done in the next couple of years is probably a little aggressive.
Yes.
A little bit.
So it's probably okay. Thank you. Dan, your hand's up. Old hand. All right. So shall we move to the public, or do we have anything else to discuss? Okay, we'll move to the public for public comment. Again, public, there is no chat, so please, you'll have to raise your hand. We'll call on you and we'll allow you to speak. Mary Grizzle. Welcome, Mary.
Mary, you can unmute and speak.
Hold on.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I have a couple of things I'd like to mention. The first is, I'm not sure if this is the place, but there has to be a limit on the 2-year leases the city is giving out to the strip mall businesses on Lafayette. And I'd like to make sure that that is also stated, because that could delay the project a lot. And the second thing I'd like to say is, I must say that what a great asset that David Sargent has been to this project. and what a great asset he would be to any city if he were employed there, hand in hand to our city. Also, I would like to say that at least pages 8 through 13, people have told me it appears to be a love letter written to me. And after going through it a little bit, I seem to agree. Thank you for this. I will never forget what you have meant to this project. Thank you, David. And thank you to all those that did the precise plan in WRT. Thank you for everything you've done. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, and it's absolutely a team effort, and we're all doing it together. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Mary. Sam? Welcome, Sam. Oh, I can see the floor.
Where'd he go?
I think he lowered his hand.
Oh, okay.
So does anybody from the public want to comment, ask questions? Donna. Welcome, Donna.
Donna, you should unmute and speak.
And I'm talking.
Yes.
Good evening, Donna.
Okay, sometimes mine doesn't work. And I just want to add on to Mary, her comments, and send you gratitude and thank you to this whole team of effort. It's amazing. I'll buy the first 10 theater movie tickets when it's built for everyone. Notice I limited to 10 as I'm listening to Adam on that. Make sure you have the value, but thank you. This is excellent. And yeah, blessings. Let's
Donna,
get going.
Can I ask you a question, Donna?
Sure.
What's the first show?
Well, I know the trailer. I don't know intuitively what the show's going to be, but I know the trailer, and that's the 1915 movie that we have been showing on Reclaiming Our Downtown that Rod has resurrected. So
Perfect. Thank you.
We're,
Thank you, Donna.
we're working on that video to increase it to modern day times too, as our vision goes. So there you go.
Nice. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we have Sam again. Sam?
Sam, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great.
Welcome.
I couldn't find an unmute button. Sam Sayu, and I'm not going to waste your time talking about my misspent youth on Franklin Street. In my older years, I currently serve as a member of the advisory council to the to SourceWise, the Area Agency on Aging, as well as I am currently a sitting commissioner on the Santa Clara County Senior Care Commission. And it's with that perspective that I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. And I know I haven't been coming to meetings, and so this has probably been addressed, but my concern is over accessibility and availability of amenities to seniors and people with disabilities. So I'm just hoping that that's taken into consideration as all these plans are being drawn out, because, you know, the best handicap parking spot in the world isn't worth a damn if it's 2 blocks away from the place you're trying to get to. So I'll end with that, and I want to thank you for all your hard work, and possibly I'll be seeing some of you on Saturday out at the library. We didn't used to have to name which library it was, when I was going to Santa Clara High School, that was the only library. But thank you again. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Sam. All right, any additional comments from the public before we close public comment? Make sure everybody's got a chance. All right, I don't see any additional hands, so we're going to go ahead and close public comment. And we can wrap up, right? There's no
Staff
action.
report.
Oh, staff report. Sorry, Leslie. Moving on.
I'd like to skip this one, but I can't.
It's all right.
Okay. Lovely. Oh, can you see my presentation?
It's black.
It's
there you
black.
go. It came up.
What is going on here? Okay. There we go. Okay. Now you can see the whole thing, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So our schedule update. We're getting closer to the end. Our community open house, as Sam mentioned, is this Saturday. Very exciting. So everything is moving along to schedule on our draft plan and our form-based code. Unfortunately, the bad news is we did have a slip in our EIR. We had two reports, our sewer model and our water supply analysis, that have slipped in the schedule. That pushes us a month back. And so you can see here that affects when we can take the project to Planning Commission and to City Council. So instead of being complete at the end of May, it'll now be complete at the end of June.
Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. This may be immaterial. It may not be affected by that. And it may not be something that you're prepared to answer now, but there is a state law, AB 2011, that creates all kinds of windows, most of which are very good, folks. But in a case like this, for commercially zoned property, and there is a grandfather timeline included in that legislation. It does not kick in until July, and it does
July 1st.
capture projects, but it explicitly tries to acknowledge this kind of planning process and recognize that this has value, and the intent is not to upend a thoughtful, deliberate community planning process, but plans do have to be adopted by certain dates. And I believe, this is my question, Leslie, is that there is language around either commencement or completion of the EIR.
Yes, there is.
So
what is the bill again, Matt? Sorry.
So how do I do this?
Just SB, just give me the SB. I'll look it up.
AB 2011.
Yeah, it's not SB, it's AB,
AB
2011.
Thank you.
So Matt, what you're seeing is the slippage here affects
I don't
us?
know. No, I don't want to raise red flags. I'm afraid we might be past the grandfather date anyways. But it would just be worth checking exactly what the requirements are, and to think real hard about how to lock in the process in a way that is both respectful and conforming of the law, but also serves the interests of this process. And I could go back and look, but if staff could take a look at that and figure out if there's any potential.
Thank you, Matt.
I will look at it. I have not fully reviewed this one.
No,
it's really long.
It's really long.
It's really long.
Leslie, where's the
I can
delay?
send you a cheat sheet. I do have a cheat sheet. I just haven't looked at it in a couple of weeks.
What's the Leslie, what's the slippage from? Is it from the consultant or from staff?
So it's sort of both. The way we do our sewer model is we actually have an outside consultant that runs our sewer model for us, but we provide them the information for that model. And so we gave them the information. They just got back the report to our staff to review. So our staff now needs to review that report. So that was a bit of delay. And on the water analysis there, you know, we gave them the information, but weren't clear enough on the timeline. And that was on me, not clear enough on the timeline of when I needed it exactly by. So it flipped both of those items have flipped us a month.
I mean, is there a way to pull it back in?
That is pulled back in.
Ouch.
And it accounts for the Thanksgiving holiday as well.
Denied.
The holiday's denied.
Sorry, and Christmas is already passed.
No, Christmas isn't passed yet. We're okay for Christmas.
No. All right. I mean, I think we really, yeah.
Yep.
I'm not gonna start the, shoot the flare up until I read AB 2011, but we obviously need to make sure that all of this work is not for nothing.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. Thanks, Matt, for giving me a sick feeling. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no, just to be clear, I don't see it as an imminent threat. It just is related to timetable. And
Okay.
so just to kind of put the glide path ahead in context, it would be valuable for staff to have a sense of what that structure was.
Thanks. Leslie, are there any
So-
other?
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
before we go, Adam, so
I'm not moving
can
on
we-
yet.
can we prioritize, so it's Leslie, staff, we can move that up the list as far as when you guys are going to look at that,
Look at what?
the impact
Of the assembly bill?
of it, yeah, of 2011.
Yeah. I mean, I have it right here.
It's long.
And it is long, and I haven't read the entire thing, but it seems like it is as of January 1, 2024, that a notice of preparation for the neighborhood plan was issued before January 1st, 2022, which we have already done. Our notice of preparation was issued back in May of this year. All on-site and all of the following have occurred. So
Yeah, I think we need
okay,
to-
so the neighborhood plan was adopted on or after January 1, 2022 and before January 1, 2024.
Yep.
So there's some time. And again,
What-
the environmental review is completed before January 1, 2024.
What?
Again, I've not read the entire thing, but
Yeah, we'll go through it and regroup. Leslie, what are our risks at this point? I mean, what are we still potentially going to slip on? Like, what's our critical path?
the EIR is the critical path. Like I said, I feel really comfortable with where we are with the draft plan and the form-based code.
So with the EIR, are there any other reports?
No,
reviews,
our
approvals needed?
TIA, our transportation impact analysis, was actually submitted to us a day early. So that's great. That was the other critical item that the consultant needs, because it feeds into the air quality analysis as well. So the sewer model and the water supply assessment, that goes into the utility section of the EIR. And our consultant basically takes that information, analyzes it, and uses those two reports as, backup documents to their analysis of, do we have enough utilities to serve this plan?
So currently, who's the EIR sitting with right now?
So the consultant, and they're waiting, they're not doing other parts of the EIR, but they are, in order to finish the utility section, they need this additional information.
And when's that due?
So it was originally, the utility information was originally due to them this week. but we are delayed in getting them that information. So they won't be able to finish that section until December, end of December, beginning of January.
So staff has the final components for water and sewer? That's what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah. We need to finish those two pieces of information to get to them so they can finish the EIR, the admin draft.
And they can't get that until late December?
Correct.
Or early January?
Right. So we'll get the information to them mid-December. They'll have the rest of December, probably because of the holidays, some of January, to include it in the EIR and then give us the full admin draft for review.
Okay.
And then we have a couple weeks to review it, and we give it back to them with any comments. They revise it, and then, as you see here, by March 13th, that's when we will be circulating it out to the public.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you, Leslie. I guess let's all figure out what AB 2011 is going to do, and just make sure we're not, I don't want to wait. I'll read through it during my break, I guess, on Thanksgiving.
Yes, I'll give you a hint. The stuff you want to look at, all the new stuff, is towards the end.
Thanks. Problem is, you got to read the whole thing because they hide stuff in it.
They do.
They like leaving little nuggets all the way through it. So, all right.
I had attended this session on AB 2011, and it seemed like we are good in many ways if we are able to wrap it up next year. And if anything, like, especially looking at the zoning and what they allow, we are so close in, like, what we are doing is not very far from the state's intent with the bill. No? Matt is like,
no, I think you're right, but that
Yeah.
really doesn't make any difference.
yeah.
It really,
Yeah, it
the
doesn't-
question is just, is the plan operative, or is there pieces that are wide open? And I looked at so I'm sorry I've done this to everybody. Deep breath. I think it's going to be okay. Leslie's
Thanks, Matt.
right. It seems like the kind of trigger date, we've got about a 4-month window, but boy, it's important to keep an eye on that. It seems like we've hit the other deadlines, but if staff could figure out to make sure that we're kind of on track on the earlier deadlines and that there's real clarity about what has to happen when. There's a tremendous amount that you can do when you have to, and this would be a case in which it would really be in our interest to make sure that we're in under the wire. Again, this process is one in which this law is intended to protect. It's not my fault that we're on meeting 34 of a plan 7. And so it really deserves the respect, and I just don't want it to get tripped up because we're just not paying attention.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matt. It's a really good point. Okay. Anything else, Leslie?
No, I just have up here. So we did, council did approve the City Hall relocation study. All parties have now signed that contract, and we'll be having our kickoff meeting, staff with the consultants, in early December. So that work will get started. Also, our community open house is this Saturday. So hope to see you all there. I know some of the task force members are not available, but looking forward to that. And in case you don't know, it's at the Mission Branch Library from 10 to noon. So come see us. And then we're still planning commission, city council study sessions on the plan and the form-based code in the spring. And then, as we said before, as Manuel said before, the RFP would be going out after the precise plan is adopted.
Just a reminder, Leslie, I want to make sure that Surplus Land Act process first. That would be the next step to the precise plan is adopted.
Thank you.
We want
to add that to the slide.
We want to clarify that on the slide, because that would be the next step after adoption, not the RFP.
Thank you, Manuel.
Leslie, thanks for raising the workshop. I think everyone has a flyer that they can share with your communities, but please do.
Yeah, and it has been out on our social media as well for the city.
Great.
Awesome. Anything else, Leslie?
That is all I have for you all.
Okay, we'll move on to public presentations. So if there's anybody who would like to address the task force, well, should we let the consultants go? They probably don't need to.
Yes, they can.
Yeah, thank you, David, Peter.
Thank you, guys.
Andrew,
Thank you.
appreciate it. I don't
Great
want
work.
you all stick it out.
Yeah, great
Thank
work,
you.
guys.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Look forward to
Thank you.
seeing you on Saturday.
See you Saturday.
See you Saturday. So if there's anybody from the public that would like to address the task force on items that were not on tonight's agenda, like you to go ahead and raise your hand, give you a chance to address anything that was not discussed on the agenda tonight. Sam, I don't know if your hand is still up. It's been up, or if you want to speak on a. Okay.
I think.
Mary, go ahead.
I just have a quick question on what Leslie said. Does this delay the approval of the form-based code and the precise plan?
Yes, it does. Correct.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that sucks.
Yes, it does. You are correct.
Not very happy at all. I want to thank WRT. I want to thank David Sargent. I want to thank the team, but I can tell you I am not happy with the city at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else from the public that would like to address the task force on anything that was not on the agenda this evening? All right, seeing no hands, I'd like to just mention that there's the historical home tour on December 2nd from 6 to 10 p.m. and Saturday, December 3rd from 12 to 5, and tickets are available in Santa Clara's home tour. It's a great way to walk through the neighborhood, see some of the old architecture and homes, and actually get to, be part of the community and see all of the docents and have a great time. So I fully recommend anybody who has the time or the desire to do so to participate. It's a really fun event. So,
Just want to piggyback on that because Harris Lass is having pictures with Santa on Sunday with Santa. Bring the kids. You got to go to the farm. There'll be cider and cookies. It's going to be a real good time. So Harris Lass, noon to just a couple hours, noon to 2.
On Sunday, the 4th?
Yep. Yes. So it'll be party on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. It's a full weekend.
I will try to be there. And my 3-year-old daughter told me that she's not scared of Santa this year, but she bawled last year. So we'll check it out. We'll see how it goes. She told me she's not scared of him anymore.
Awesome.
All right, everyone. Well, with that, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting of November 17th?
So
Moved.
Whoa. That was everybody at one time.
Really? Not me. I want to hang out a little longer.
Second.
Wait.
Oh.
Okay.
I hit it first.
Okay, I'm gonna say Rob was first and Matthew was second. That's what I'm going with.
You got it.
All in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no.
No.
All right, the motion carries. The meeting is adjourned to the next regular scheduled meeting on the DCATF on December 15, 2022. Thank you, everybody. Have a happy Turkey Day.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, you guys.
Bye.
Happy
Enjoy.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you all.
Enjoy.
See you Saturday.
Yeah.
Leslie, I won't. Happy Thanksgiving,
I know. I'm
though.
so sorry.
Me neither, but that's okay.
Yeah.
All
You'll be
right.
there in spirit.
There
I
you
will.
go.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Good night, guys.
See you guys.